Perfect. I was just about to say this will be recorded. We posted on our YouTube later so that everyone has access to either watch it again or if they had to miss this meeting, they could watch it for the first time. And we'll make sure we send it out after we post it. So welcome, my name is Marvia Clements. I'm the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and Coastal Management Fellow at the California State Coastal Conservancy. And right now I'm managing the Community Wetlands Grant Program along with Kellen Warner. I grew up in Oxnard, California, so I absolutely love working on this project. It brings me back to kind of supporting the communities where I grew up. So thank you all for joining today. I'll give Kellen a moment to introduce herself.
Thanks, Marvia. I'm Kellen. I am a project manager for the Conservancy. I've worked on the CWRGP project for a couple of years, and Marvia has now too, so we're old pros. I currently live in San Diego. I grew up in the LA region, and I actually used to work in informal science education and youth workforce development. So this type of project is very near and dear to my heart as well. Thanks for all being here today, guys.
Thanks, Kellen. So for today's webinar, what we're going to be doing is providing an overview of the Southern California Wetland Restoration Project's Community Wetland Restoration Grant Program. That is quite a mouthful, so you'll often hear me referring to it simply as the CWRGP today. We'll be discussing the background of the CWRGP, the 2024 grant round details, and then we will go into the application guidelines and the template and the selection criteria, as well as what you can expect if you are selected as a 2024 grantee. And just general housekeeping, we will address questions regarding the application and anything else we've discussed during the webinar at the end in a Q&A format, but please feel free to input questions into the chat box or the Q&A box as they come up throughout the presentation, and we'll make sure we get to those at the end. And for context, this slide shows the geographic extent of the Wetlands Recovery Project region, which stretches along the coast from the US-Mexico border in San Diego up to Point Conception in the Santa Barbara subregion. Each coastal wetland is indicated by a red dot on this map, while non-tidal wetlands are shown as individual blue dots. The CWRGP projects in the past have taken place throughout this region as well as on the Channel Islands. And the Southern California Wetland Recovery Project, WRP for short, is the project that runs the Community Wetlands Restoration Grant Program. It's a partnership of 18 state and federal agencies and is chaired by the California Natural Resources Agency and supported by the California State Coastal Conservancy. And through the WRP partnership, public agencies, scientists, and local communities work cooperatively to support and facilitate the enhancement and restoration of wetlands in coastal Southern California. And just for a little bit of deeper understanding about the Wetlands Recovery Project, the Wetlands Recovery Project is guided by our regional strategy, which was updated in 2018. As you saw on the previous slide, there are 18 agencies that are members of the Wetland Recovery Project, so it takes a lot of coordination to have all of us all on the same page. So this strategy outlines which goals we have identified as important. You can see our 4 main goals here. They are to preserve and restore resilient coastal tidal wetlands and associated marine and terrestrial habitats, to preserve and restore streams, adjacent habitats, and other non-tidal wetland ecosystems to support healthy watersheds, to support education and compatible access related to coastal wetlands and watersheds, and lastly, to advance the science of wetland restoration and management in Southern California. And the 2018 Wetlands Recovery Project Regional Strategy is a document that also articulates the objectives and management strategies that we've identified to help us meet those goals over time. And I want to flag that while the Community Wetlands Restoration Grant Program supports achieving all 4 of these goals, since it's directly tied to restoration and can certainly be used to advance science, it really targets goal 3, by supporting community-based restoration projects. Historically, this program is funded by various agencies and organizations. This year, the CWRGP will be administered by the State Coastal Conservancy and funded by the Coastal Conservancy along with the Wildlife Conservation Board and the San Gabriel and Lower Los Angeles Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. And just a bit of background on the program, since 2001, the CWRGP has provided over $4 million in funding to over 175 community-based restoration projects in coastal wetlands and along coastal stream corridors in the Southern California region. A few years ago, the program underwent a programmatic evaluation process, and this included a gap assessment to determine who funding had gone to in the past and where those projects were located. And on the flip side, who hadn't been receiving funding and what areas historically have seen a lack of CWRGP projects. We also solicited feedback from former grantees and worked with program partners to re-envision the program with the overall goals of reaching a broader audience, funding wetland restoration projects that are rooted in and benefit systemically excluded communities, and improve support for capacity building. So the revisioning process led to there being a total of 4 CWRGP program priorities. The first is to engage CWRGP priority communities to restore or enhance coastal wetland and coastal stream corridors. These priority communities include, but are not limited to, lower income individuals and households, people with disabilities, Black, Indigenous people of color, immigrant communities, and other historically marginalized communities. There are a number of tools that have been developed to help identify these priority communities, such as CalEnviroscreen, California State Parks Community Fact Finder, and California Department of Water Resources GIS maps. Kellen has dropped these in the chat. But also, if you're just already working with these communities, if you are a program that's led by these communities, the maps aren't something that you necessarily have to use. You can just describe your relationship to these communities in your application. They're just there as a tool if you so choose to use them. The second is to implement restoration projects that have strong community benefits, such as community engagement, education, workforce development, career development, and leadership development. The third priority is to demonstrate community-led planning and implementation of habitat restoration projects that are anchored in community expertise. Examples of this can include community leaders, community-based organizations, tribal members, local planners, or local and state government officials. And the fourth priority is to increase organizational capacity to plan and implement habitat restoration projects. And the second part of this presentation focuses on the 2024 CWRGP grant cycle. So I'm going to pass it over to Kellen for this part.
Great. So is your project eligible for this funding? We're going to talk all about it. So first thing to look at is who can apply for this grant, who is an eligible applicant. Those are 501c3 nonprofit organizations, local government agencies, either city or county, federally recognized tribes, and universities, both nonprofit or public. And eligible projects include restoration or preservation of coastal wetlands, coastal stream corridors, or other non-tidal wetlands. Projects must have a primary goal of restoration of a coastal wetland, either estuarine or vernal pool, or a coastal stream corridor in Southern California. Projects must also involve community in the restoration implementation and have an educational component. Next slide, please. So approximately $580,000. Nope. Yep. 580K will be available for this grant round. Applicants for projects within the priority region of the lower LA River corridor, which I'll talk about in the next slide, can request a grant amount of up to $150,000. And applicants for the project outside of that region may request a grant amount of up to $100,000. The average grant amount, it's hard to say. We're going to say it's between $30,000 and $100,000. Next slide, please. And the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, who is one of the funding agencies for this grant that Maravia mentioned, is supporting a targeted geographic area of the lower LA River corridor. which is an area that's received limited funding from this program in the past. And so $300,000 of the available $580,000 is allotted specifically for this region. It's outlined in red on the map, and it extends 1.5 miles out from the LA River, as well as the Rio Hondo and Compton Creek tributaries. So just to reiterate, projects in this region can request a grant amount of up to $150,000. And we anticipate there'll be 5 to 8 projects selected for funding in total this year. Next slide, please. So in terms of your project, the duration, we a maximum of 2.5 years. Project start date is winter of 2025, and the project completion date is October 1st of 2027. And that's a hard stop because this funding source is running out. So make sure if you are planning a project for this funding and you get it, stops October 1st of 2027. Next slide, please. So we have 3 examples of previously funded projects on the screen, and activities amongst these 3 projects included installation of native plants, removal of non-native vegetation, seeding and propagation, trash abatement, establishment of educational kiosks, students, families, and community members participating in habitat restoration events and educational field trips, which included wetland conservation, indigenous significance of the land, wildlife, vegetation, water quality and monitoring, professional development workshops for teachers to learn about wetland ecology, stormwater runoff, and watersheds. And so these examples of project types and activities are provided in the application guidelines. However, that list is not fully inclusive. So if you're wondering if your project type is eligible, please schedule a consultation with us. We would love to talk to you about it and figure out if your project is a fit or if there are ways we can make it a fit. Next slide, please. Okay, other considerations. We will not award more than 1 CWRGP grant per applicant. Projects proposed for transitional upland habitat must demonstrate a clear connection and benefit to the adjacent wetland habitat. If the applicant is not the landowner of the project site, the applicant will need to provide evidence of landover approval prior to project implementation. No going rogue. And grant recipients will be required to enter into up to a 15 to 20-year grant agreement to ensure long-term protection of the project site. So the restored property is operated, used, and maintained for the project purpose for 15 to 20 years. And it's not just being turned into a parking lot a couple years after we fund this project. Next slide, please. Okay, these are things that we cannot fund, unfortunately, with this money. We cannot fund solely experimental or research projects. Can't fund anything that's solely a construction project or solely recreational or ongoing monitoring and maintenance projects unless it's tied to a specific restoration project where monitoring is necessary to ensure project success and completion within the duration of the project. Again, there's a lot of caveats with this. If you have questions, please reach out to us because we'd love to chat with you about it. Next slide, please. All right, we're going into the selection criteria. Ooh, animation. Okay. Number 1, extent to which the project will restore coastal wetlands, streams, adjacent habitats, and other non-tidal wetlands. And this slide is just about for us as we're going through and selecting projects and deciding between applicants. Well, this is what we're specifically looking at. Number 2 is the extent to which the project meaningfully engages CWRGP priority communities to restore or enhance coastal wetlands and coastal stream corridors. Number 3, degree to which the project implements restoration projects that have strong community benefits, such as community engagement, education, workforce development, career development, and leadership development. 4, the extent to which the project demonstrates community-led planning and implementation of desired projects that are anchored in community expertise. Next slide, please. 5, the extent to which the project will advance meaningful hands-on community involvement in a wetland restoration project, particularly involvement beyond the traditionally engaged environmental groups. 6, degree to which the project will help build the applicant's capacity to plan and implement wetland restoration projects and/or increase community engagement in wetland restoration projects. And finally, number 7, applicant experience and capacity to implement the project and provide required long-term protection agreements. And now I'll pass it back over to Maravia to talk about the grant program process.
Thanks, Kellen. So this is everyone's favorite part, applying for the grant and all the paperwork that comes with it. So we're going to walk you through what you can expect from this process. If you are interested in applying for this grant cycle, these are the important dates that you should keep in mind. Applications will be due May 17th, 2024 by 5 p.m. Pacific time, after which there will be an application review by the selection committee. Provisional notification of award or denial will be sent to applicants in June 2024. Selected project proposals are to be presented to the Coastal Conservancy Board for funding approval in September or November of 2024. And following that board approval, the Coastal Conservancy will enter into grant agreements and develop work programs with successful applicants in the winter of 2024 and 2025. It is anticipated that funding will become available to grantees by January or February 2025, at which point the project can begin. So the grant application guidelines are meant to provide highly detailed information and complement the application template. You can find both of those on our website, which Kellen will drop the link for into the chat. I really encourage applicants to read through the guidelines before they even begin to fill out the template. It's a really useful document that we do update yearly and should really help guide you in filling out that template. And this is what that website page will look like. You can see here the arrows that point to where you can download both the guidelines for the application as well as the application template. So what will be on the template? A complete proposal will contain the following 4 sections. The first will be an application cover page. The second will be the project narrative, which will be a maximum of 7 pages. Last year it was 6 pages, but we got a lot of feedback that folks wanted just a little more space to describe certain aspects of their project. So this is just my own plug as someone that manages the program to fill out your surveys after you submit. We do go through them and listen to any feedback that you have. The third thing is the project budget, and the fourth will be any additional attachments. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time going over each of these sections in more detail. The cover page just asks for basic information about the project, including contact information, a summary of the project, and information about the location of the project. The meat of the application will be in your project narrative, which again will be a maximum of 7 pages. This has 13 sections that you'll need to complete. In the application template, you'll find instructions on how to answer each of these sections and questions that come up. But for now, I'm going to run through all of them and provide just a bit of additional context. I know Kellen put the website in the chat. If you want to have the template up and follow through as I go through these, you are more than welcome. So the first thing we will ask for is what is the need for the project? And you'll have 1 to 2 paragraphs to describe why you think this project is needed. The second will be a site description. This should just be a short 1 paragraph that describes your site characteristics and includes who owns and manages the site location. The third section will ask which of the community wetland restoration grant program priorities this project will meet. All you will do is simply go through and check off a box for which of these 4 you will be meeting. And I want to just flag that when the selection committee is reviewing projects, we're going to be considering not just how many of these a project meets, but how strongly they're meeting each of these priorities. And you'll get to describe that more in section 4, which is the project description. So that will start off with asking you to describe how the project will meet each of the CWRGP priorities that you have selected. It will also ask you to describe the goals, objectives, and expected benefits of your project. It will ask you to describe how restoration efforts will increase wetland acreage or enhance existing wetland or wetland associated habitat. And it will ask you to provide a description of the restoration methods, including use of best available science or practices if applicable. So for example, we want to know what science you've used in your design or plan to use in the implementation or evaluation of your project. This section is 1 to 2 pages, so it is the longest section of your project narrative. We really encourage that this isn't just something you go through and answer the bullet points with like bullet point by bullet point, but instead work to tell us kind of the story of your project. So 1 to 2 pages of a cohesive story explaining your project to us. The 5th section is on the CWRGP priority community engagement. This one is broken down into 3 subsections. The first will merely ask for you to describe any priority communities the project will engage with. Again, you can use the mapping tools we put in the chat earlier if you find that useful. We also want you to describe the relationship the project team has with the priority community. So what we want to know is if the project is led or co-led by an organization that is led by or primarily serves members of the CWRGP community. And if not, how is your project planning to engage these communities in meaningful ways? Examples we've seen of some meaningful engagement in past projects includes ensuring partners have decision-making power in the project or providing workforce training and paid internships. We've also seen larger organizations that have a higher capacity apply for the grant, but include smaller organizations that are their partners as sub-grantees so that they can actually receive decent bulks of the funding. And again, we're happy to discuss any ideas or questions you have about this more. As Kellen pointed out, we're here for questions and are happy to schedule consultations and hear more about your projects and ideas. And lastly, for the CWRGP priority section, we're asking you to describe any challenges or difficulties the community faces in accessing the area to be restored or enhanced. And I want to flag that I know that a lot of this might be coming up in your project description. That's fine. This is just a section where we really want you to highlight what you're doing to support that community engagement. The 6th section will be on project readiness. This will be 1 to 2 paragraphs where you just describe how close your project is to implementation and demonstrate that it will be ready to start in the project timeline. As Kellen pointed out, the funding for this dries up in October 1st of 2027. So we just want to make sure that this project is feasible within that timeline. This ties into question 7, which is on your permits. This will ask you to list any permits that your project requires and what their respective status is. This is similar again to question 8, which is where we want to know if your project is under the California Environmental Quality Act or CEQA. This is one of those things where if you have a question on this for your specific project, again, I know I sound like a broken record here, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email or to schedule a consultation. The 9th section for your project narrative will be on specific tasks. There will be a table here where you fill out what tasks will take place under your project, along with a brief description of them. And the 10th section will ask you to, we'll be asking how you're measuring success. And for this, this is one of those sections we allowed to be a little bit longer this time around. We really want to know what metrics or tools you plan to use to measure success, not just ecologically, but also for outreach. So some examples we've seen for ecological measurements is species survival count of plantings. For outreach, we might see things like counting how many volunteers show up, or surveys with teachers if you're a program that's partnering with classrooms. What we really want to know is just that you're considering what worked well in your project and what can be improved upon in the future. And we love to hear that as well if it's something that we can also recommend to future projects. The 11th section is where we want you to list your partnerships and collaborations. Again, we know this will likely also come up earlier in the project description, but this is where we really want you to highlight who those partners are and who you're collaborating with. It also makes it easy for us to just look at this section and see who all those partners are in one place. The 12th section is on tribal engagement. I do want to go into a bit more detail here. We encourage that projects communicate, consult, or engage with tribes traditionally and culturally affiliated to the project area throughout the development and implementation of the project, particularly if the project applicant is not a tribe. So the Coastal Conservancy will be initiating consultation requests with tribal governments for any selected projects prior to recommending the project for funding to our board. If you say that you are partnering with a California Native American tribe or tribal organization, that should mean you've already agreed to work on this project with them. If for whatever reason you're waiting to secure funding to reach out to a tribe, which is something we've seen before, you need to make that clear in your application so we understand what level your partnership is at when you're saying you're having conversations with tribes. Again, though, we do really strongly encourage that applicants communicate with tribes as early as possible. And lastly, the 13th question is on the applicant experience and capacity. We want to know what your history is with managing grants and with running similar projects. So I know that was a lot. Again, this is all listed in the template with context, and we have the guidelines that will help you go through it. The last section is simply just your project budget. The budget can support a range of activities. We have a table that you fill out, as you can see up here. Feel free to add or modify task titles to fit your project as appropriate, as well as adding or removing rows as necessary. When you are making your budget, please round amounts to the nearest $100. Unfortunately, we cannot use funding for this project on food or drink. I know that is difficult since you are often working with volunteers. And I wish we could, but it is just not something that our funding source can support. And I want to note that organizational capacity, workforce development, and project planning and development activities must be related to wetland restoration project activities, and altogether they must not total more than 50% of the total funding amount requested from the WRP. And when we say capacity building related to wetland restoration, that could both be building up capacity of your own organization to do restoration, but it could also be building up capacity of your group to reach out to engage with communities to do wetland work and connect to those wetlands in the future. And the final section will be your attachments. We're going to ask for a regional and site scale map that shows the location of project elements, and 1 to 3 project photos that provide more detail as to what the project site looks like. In addition, if you are a nonprofit, you should include the following with the applications: a letter of determination from the IRS indicating current IRS 501c3 status, as well as a completed nonprofit organization pre-award questionnaire. And I do want to note that applicants who have submitted the nonprofit questionnaire in the past 2 years to the California State Coastal Conservancy do not need to resubmit this year. Just let us know that you have already submitted that within the last 2 years so we can find it in our records. And just a reminder, please don't include more attachments than what we ask for specifically here. So that is all we will be asking you for. Electronic submissions, again, should be emailed to me by 5 p.m. on May 15th, 2023. These should all be uploaded as a single file in Microsoft Word or converted to a PDF file. And please make sure the electronic file has your project name in it and isn't excessively large. It needs to be able to be sent over email. So that's just something to think about before 5 p.m. when you're trying to send that to me. If for whatever reason electronic submission is not possible, hard copy applications must be postmarked by May 17th, 2024 and sent to me at the address indicated in the application package. If possible, please notify me via email that I should be looking out for your hard copy. And I have already received some questions around what will be required of projects that are selected. Before work can begin, we do need the following documents. The first is a grant agreement between you and the Coastal Conservancy. The next is a board resolution, which must be signed by the appropriate authorities at your organization. We'll need an insurance policy certificate that shows the required types and levels of insurance and lists the state of California as an additional insured and references your Coastal Conservancy grant number. Your insurance agent should be able to provide that certificate for you. And lastly, you will need a work program which details specific tasks, deliverables, project schedule, and task level budget for your project. The work program can be amended over time if changes are needed and is a lot easier to amend than your grant agreement. So that is why we have this kind of detailed work program in addition to things like your grant agreement. And for invoicing the Conservancy, you will need a completed request for disbursement form and progress report describing work done during your billing period. Once we receive all of these things, that's when you'll get your notice to proceed. That makes it really clear that this is the point at which work can start, and you can bill us and get reimbursed for it. Further instructions for all of these requirements, as well as templates for the board resolution and work program, can be found in our grantee manual, which you can find on our website. Additionally, you will have an assigned project manager who can assist you with meeting any of these requirements. That's literally our job, so we're happy to help grantees figure out how to navigate getting reimbursed and getting their grants off the ground. And as I believe we have all mentioned earlier, we love having you reach out for consultations to hear more about your project and help guide you if it needs a little bit of tweaking to be eligible for our program. So don't hesitate to reach out. My email is down right here. You can also reach out to Kellen if she wants to plop her email in the chat. And I do believe we have some time left for questions. So please use the Q&A feature if you haven't already, or feel free to raise your hand and Kellen can unmute you. And I've just put my email in the chat as well. And we'll give it just a couple more minutes in case anyone is typing their question. But also, if there's no questions, that just means we've done a great job describing it, Kellen. And again, you can always reach out to us via email if anything comes up later.
We should have planted someone in the audience to get it going. Just kidding. I know it's a lot of information all at once, but we said about 50 times that you can reach out anytime afterwards. So I hope you all take that to heart. Great, thanks, Sheila. Sheila says we've answered all of her questions.
Great, love to hear that.
Yeah. Awesome. Someone's reaching out for a consultation. Thanks, Vince. We look forward to talking to you about it. Yeah, we'll send a follow-up email to everyone who attended and everyone who said they would attend and wasn't able to make it with the recording. So you have this information as you're filling out the application later. You know, it's a lot of information at once that you'll need as you go. So it's available. What do you think, Marvia? Close it out?
I think so. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.